Our first scripture reading is from Psalm 91, verses 1 through 6. You who live in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the hunter and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and defense. You will not fear the terror of the night, or the arrow that flies by day, or the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, or the destruction that wastes at noonday. Our gospel reading is from Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. One day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let us go across to the other side of the lake. So they put out, and while they were sailing, he fell asleep. A windstorm swept down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in danger. They went to him and woke him up, shouting, Master, Master, we are perishing. And waking up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves. They ceased, and there was a calm. Then he said to them, where is your faith? They were terrified and amazed, and said to one another, who is this then, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. I am very excited that the autumn season has began. It is my favorite, and it's also my favorite because we get to start stewardship season. Yay! Now, I know most people don't. Oh, I am caught on the microphone. I shouldn't have taken it off. So sorry. Hold 30 seconds. Wardrobe malfunction. It was just so clicky-clacky. All right, moving on. Now, I know most people don't like to talk about budgets and money because it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but for me, I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see what resources we have, to see all the wonderful things that we have done, and then get to do again next year. And each week, for the next 4 weeks, we will get to hear from a member of Journey as they talk about how Journey has impacted them and all of the exciting things that they've experienced here and all the exciting things they're planning to do. Now, here at Journey, I think all of you probably know, but I was excited to find that we work and are blessed with incredibly competent volunteers. So competent, in fact, that I am convinced they could be doing the work they do for us for free for a lot of money somewhere else. And when I tell you that it saves our church hundreds each week and thousands each year, I am not exaggerating. This week, we get to hear from Wayne, who is our facilities volunteer extraordinaire. I know most of you know Wayne, but if you are new to our church family or you're visiting us for the first time online, I wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Wayne. Are you excited? Wayne is an Excel spreadsheet genius. Master, someone said from the back. That is exactly true. He has created a form in Excel that makes the terms of call process for a pastor seem like a simple and enjoyable affair. He has designed a spreadsheet that breaks down by the per foot the ministry impact we have made by opening our space to the community. His budgets are precise and clear. And one of my favorite things, he has created a spreadsheet that calculates how to build a labyrinth depending on the width of the aisles and how many turns you want in it. I came to him and I said, I know we're designing a labyrinth. I would really love for it to be wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs. And he said, okay. So he pulls up his spreadsheet that I didn't know existed and is amazing, and he just types in a number at the very top, and all of the other numbers calculate. It takes into account the width of the borders of each path. It takes into account how many layers you would like, and it spits out the full diameter that the labyrinth would be, depending on how much space we have. And you can click in all of these different things to change that, to kind of play with it, to figure out how we're doing. It's magical. Let's see. This is apart from the work that he does every single week. Now, it's cool in here today, but if it wasn't, you would notice that our HVAC is working again, which is magical, and the HVAC that went out earlier this month in the office is working again. Then, when we consider all of the incredibly other fabulous folks that are on the facilities team, that take care of the grounds, who repair our internet, Mark in the back there and John in the front here, and spends hours on the phone with Microsoft. Is Brian here today? I don't think I have Brian. He did our internet this week. They spend hours on the phone with Microsoft to fix our emails. It is crystal clear to me that the facility team is an integral ministry at Journey. We would not function without them. So today, during our normal offering hours, we get the distinct pleasure from hearing from Wayne. And while I'll be talking for the next 4 weeks a little bit about the importance of pledges, which I found out last week is a uniquely Presbyterian term at times. Can you raise your hand to tell me if you know what a pledge is? All right, okay, so we've got most of us, that's great. I wanted to take time for my sermon today to draw the last 2 weeks of our service into a more cohesive circle before we move on. On the 14th, we talked about how the love of God, by loving ourselves and others, and remembering that we are all children of God, and how any message of violence or hate or oppression is not a message of Jesus. Basically, we talked about Jesus' message of what you do for the least of these, you do to me. Then last week, I talked about the cycle of action: lament, rest, act, repeat, and how we must allow ourselves to do all three of those things to continue the justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with our God. To continue to be the hands and feet of Christ, we must allow ourselves time to lament and grieve, to rest and refill our body and mind and spirit, and to take that step into action so that we can help be the change God is looking for in the world. So today, after all of those things, I want to spend some time to reassure you that we are not left on our own to stumble through life's twists and turns. For every cry of grief and anger brought to God in the Bible, we can also point to several more places in the text that people bring God praise and joy and faith and trust. It is this trust, this faith, that Jesus is always with us that I want to bring to you today, because it is a balm for my soul daily. So, let's tell a story of a boat and a storm and a sleeping man. In our New Testament passage today, there's the HVAC. In our New Testament passage today, Jesus has spent a great deal of time teaching through the parables to predominantly Jewish section of Galilee, and is now going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the eastern, predominantly Gentile coast. Imagine after a long day, Jesus simply decides it's time to set sail, just as he is. That's with very little preparation, which sounds like with no preparation at all, I'm sure, to the disciples. Jesus, who I'm sure is ready for some quiet and some rest, retires to the stern of the boat and falls asleep. Suddenly, the sea whips into a terrifying squall of a storm. His disciples, many of whom were even experienced fishermen, were terrified. They were also extremely confused and rightfully frustrated as to why Jesus, their teacher, this powerful man of God, who may even be the Son of God, was sleeping on the boat and not doing something about the problem. When they rouse him, Jesus gets up, rebukes the storm, and calms the sea. And then he has the nerve to turn to the disciples and be annoyed and befuddled as to why they were panicking in the first place. Jesus wonders aloud why they still don't have the faith that he does. In the Anchor Bible Dictionary, the boat is listed as number 2 as the major symbols of the Christian culture, as it is in many. It says the boat expresses security in an alien environment. This stems from many ancient religions where the boat bore the dead to another world. The boat of the Bible often protected people from threatening waters or deliverance to a threatened people. In ancient times, storms were usually seen as an act of cosmic forces. In the Bible, too, the storms were often symbols of people's trials and their fear. In our story today, it refers to the disciples' fear, worry, and lack of faith, in contrast to Jesus' faith in God. Okay, but I have to say, I don't blame the disciples. In fact, I wonder if traveling with Jesus often felt like they were stuck in a storm of danger and trials and judgment, and Jesus' typically calm faith in God seemed like he was sleeping through the tempest. This reminds me how it feels when we are in the middle of our own storms. The wind, the rain, the rocking boat, the fear, and the turmoil. We're doing everything we can to bucket all of that water out before we capsize and our heads go under. Some storms are personal ones. A mom who suffered a miscarriage and is trying to conceive again. Someone who found out they can't have kids at all. Someone who's been through 16 rounds of IVF, usually 3 rounds of IVF, and has been told that they can't have kids. The process in general of surrogacy is also hard, or adoption. The storm of someone being sick or found a lump and is waiting for test results, praying that really big, loud prayer of, God, don't let it be cancer. Or those who've gone through that and are now in treatment. Or for those whose treatment has not been successful. The storm of someone who's in an abusive relationship, either with their partner or their family, and they can't figure out a way out because in front of everyone else, their partner is wonderful, and maybe it will get better. These do not even scratch the surface of the storms we go through personally. We also go through storms together, as a community, as a country, and as a world. The storm of watching women's rights, LGBTQIA+ rights, BIPOC rights, immigrant rights, and simply human rights be chipped away at little bit by bit, and then having other people yell at you that they support the removal of these freedoms because that is what God, the one you're supposed to love, tells them to do. The storm of food deserts, poverty, and climate crisis. The storm of feeling helpless as we watch war and genocide and violence, hatred, greed, and death play out on our devices in a continual loop that seems to never have an end. Each of these has a larger storm that is outside of us, one that we are called to walk through. But with it, we have the storms that are internal too. When the world seems to reel around us, we feel rage, lament, panic, grief, helplessness, and frustration. When we allow our internal storms to whip us up into a frenzy to drown in them, we cannot make our way through the storms going on in the world. I so wish that I could have a faith as good and big and true as Jesus's. A big enough faith that the fear I feel inside doesn't create a storm that drowns me. That I can quiet my soul enough to sail through the tempest. That I can have the faith to continue the work for a better world. Because it seems like that is the faith that Jesus is asking us to have. On that boat, Jesus knew God would get them through the stormy sea, but the disciples surely didn't. They worked themselves up into a state of utter panic. Instead of being calm enough to sail through the storm, they let their own internal storms overtake them? How do we calm the storms of our mind and our body and our souls? How do we defeat the fear and faithlessness that whips us into an uncontrollable tidal wave? I think the key part here to consider is when Jesus responds to the disciples' plea for help and expresses frustration. They didn't have the faith that God would get them through it. It wasn't that Jesus was saying God would stop the storm from going on around them, because it was clear Jesus wouldn't have done that if the disciples hadn't have woken him up. Instead, Jesus is trying to express that God was with them in the storm, and God would see them through it. They just needed to calm their internal panic and have faith to continue to row. When the metaphorical boat is filling with water, and I fear that I will perish, I do my best to remember Christ's reassurance that God is with me, so that I can have the faith that God will see me through the dark and lonesome valley. This faith calms the storm of my mind, so that I will have the strength and wherewithal to forge through the hurricanes of life. So we know God is with us in the storm, walking through the darkness with us. That's great. But what about the terrible things that are happening in the world? Will God calm the gales that blow our country and world into smithereens? Is it when we come to this point where we wonder those things, where is God in the external storms, that I remember the idea of the Imago Dei. The Imago Dei means the image of God, and is discussed when the Bible says we are made in the image of God. It suggests that because we are all made in the image of God, we have inherent dignity and value. What's interesting about this is if the whole spectrum of men, women, and in between were made in the image of God, imagine what we can learn about God by meeting people who are decidedly different than what we are. We were made in the image of God, and your uniqueness teaches each person you meet something new about our Creator. If we were all made in the image of God, that means God can be seen through all of us. People of different ethnicities, social classes, sexual orientations. God can be seen in each one of us. God can be seen in me, in you, your loved ones, your families. God can be seen in the business person and the houseless one. God can be seen in the sex worker and in a nun. God can be seen in our siblings in the First Nations, our BIPOC siblings, and the queer community. God can even be seen in the people we dislike most in the world. And anytime someone reaches out a hand to help me when I'm sinking, whenever someone offers food to the hungry, or marches for justice, or fights against the oppression of others, I know I can find God there in them. I know that that is God showing up through them. When I see Jesus shining through the eyes of somebody else, it helps me find the faith to continue on. I think that we are the hands and the feet of Jesus. And while I would love it if he would just reach out a physical hand and stop the tempests of the world, he works through each of us to quell the storm. You can see Christ, God, Spirit, the divine, shining out of the faces around us. He is with us in the people who march for freedom and equality, those who help people who are in need of aid, and those who work for the solutions to systemic systems of hate and injustice. He can be seen when we write letters to our faith families and those who are homebound, when we offer support to someone who is struggling, when we spend time volunteering at church and elsewhere, or when we make the very faith-filled decision to donate some of our monetary resources to our church homes so that their ministries can continue. Do you like how I wound that all together? Jesus is with us in our most desperate hour. and reminds us to have faith, whether that be when we feel Christ's arm around our shoulders or when we feel instead the comforting arm of another human. Jesus and God walk with us to ensure that we can calm our internal storms and continue to walk through the external ones. God can be seen through us as we work together to make it safely to the other side and to support others in their journeys. Life is hard and beautiful and tragic and joyful and a loving mess of wind whipping across our faces. And we are not left alone in the storm, so we will persevere. Thank you for listening.